everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited to present to you the very first episode of a new show called Dr. Susan Presents The Mentor Project. And the Mentor Project, you're going to be hearing all about it. I'm so excited to be a part of this really, really wonderful it's not just a project, it's actually a way of life in some ways. It's changing the lives of so many. So on our very first episode, I am so excited to have the founder of the Mentor Project, Debbie Heiser.
Hi, Susan. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here with you, and I'm so excited to talk to you about the Mentor Project.
Well, this is great, and I just want to tell everybody a little bit about Debbie. Dr. Debbie Heiser is an applied developmental psychologist, an aging specialist, an adjunct professor, and writer. And she also did a great TEDx talk about mentoring. And so I'm so very excited to have her as my very first guest on Dr. Susan Presents the Mentor Project. Your question of what is the most precious natural resource? And I'm going to turn to you to give the answer because you just so beautifully talk about this.
Yes, our most precious natural resource. Most people, what's the first thing you think of? Most people think of diamonds or oil or coal or gas, all these natural resources that we all hear about us spending money on or saving for. But in fact, our most precious resource is us. And it's one that we've been wasting. And the goal of the Mentor Project has been to access our most precious natural resource, which is those who are experts in a variety of fields like science, technology, engineering, math, the arts, finance. All of these individuals who may be at the point in their lives where they're nearing the end of their career, or they've ended their career, or they're even at the peak of their career, but they have a desire to give back. And we're giving them the ability to give back, a platform to give back. It started because one of our first mentors came to me and he said, I'd love to give back to kids. I want to be able to teach them quantum mechanics in 4th grade. He said, but I'd look like a weirdo if I started to approach kids and say, hey, I'd like to teach you quantum mechanics. And I said, yeah, you would seem a little weird. So we decided to put something together and see what would happen. And in fact, we've found that there's been great success. People want to give back. They just don't know where, and they just don't know how. And that's what we're all about, is getting some of the biggest brains who've made some of the biggest impact in the world to be right in front of and available to every kid in the entire country.
And that's so great because you are putting people together that they would have normally not been together. Like when you take someone like that who's worked and had a career, and there's some interesting mentors, and everybody's gonna get to see the mentors through this program in the future. But if you can just talk to that, because what's amazing to me is that you take kids and even adults, and you are giving them the opportunity in a direct way to learn in an intimate way from them, and to even ask questions when you do it live. So can you talk a little bit about the experience that you found that the students have had and what some of the feedback you received?
Oh, sure. You know, I'll say this first of all. We all know that every mentee or every kid is going to get something from an expert coming and saying something to them. They'll get inspired. They'll see something different. They'll all, they'll say, wow, I didn't know that was an option for me. And so it's really broadening their horizons. But we don't know that, most people don't know, is that the mentors get just as much back. So when our mentors are giving to meeting up with the kids, the mentors are getting a tremendous amount. They're leaving their legacy. They're leaving, they're able to pass their knowledge on and know that that's not getting lost. Now, you asked about the kids. What are they getting out of it? They're deciding, wow, I didn't know that I could be an astrophysicist. I didn't know that there were women aerospace engineers. When we talked to kids about the mission to Mercury, and one of our mentors came on and she was there to talk about it, they thought she was the flight attendant. We are here to be able to show that, in fact, people can do whatever they want to do, and they can pursue their dream, and that by having a mentor show them that path and how they can do it, even if it's just by giving guidance through their school or through programs, through the television. This is a way that kids can say, I'm going to do something that I really never thought I could do, but now I'm going to try it.
Right, so it makes it more real for them. So they may have a dream, but they may not even know how to go about doing it. But when they see one of these people who've been doing it, this is what they've been doing their whole life, it makes it more real. And I know when you do it live, or you actually have on the website and when they're watching those tapes, ways to actually, they can ask the mentor a direct question, which is unbelievable. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, one thing I'll say is that, when you ask a young kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? You never know what you're going to hear. When I was 8, I wanted to be a nun. I'm not a nun. That's because I wasn't exposed to much. I didn't know what there was to be. And it wasn't until my horizon got broadened that I thought, wow, there's stuff out there that I could do that's interesting. So yes, the kids that are watching have the ability to see things they may not have ever even known existed, right? But they can also ask questions by going to the website. We have an Ask a Mentor button. They click on it. They can ask whatever they want. And then a mentor will answer it. Which is
amazing. That to me is like to have access to the greatest minds, really.
Yeah,
right
they
now.
really are.
They really are. I mean, I know, and our audience is going to get to see through the upcoming episodes of Dr. Susan Presents the Mentor Project. You'll be getting to see all of these, and you'll really be amazed. I'm looking forward to everybody having access to that.
Some of our mentors, I'll just give you a little hint about them, because people think, oh, I'm going to get, a lawyer or a doctor. And people think, well, that can be the only kind of mentor that I could have, or those are my only professional options that I could have going forward. But one of our mentors is the founder of the Firewall. The reason we're able to safely chat the way we are during this pandemic is because we have safety walls that make it so everyone can't crash in, or that people can't steal our information from our computer. And we also have the person who patented how we use credit cards on the internet. So every time somebody makes a purchase online, which everyone's doing now during this pandemic, we can all say, thanks, Bob, because he's the one that patented how we do that. We also have people who have flown into space. We have astronauts. We have all kinds of people who are everyday people who grew up in regular households, who said, wow, I want to do that. And they followed their dream. But they really needed to have someone show them that that was a possibility. And so those kids have access to all of those people.
And that's great. And you will be seeing them soon, because in future episodes, you will have the opportunity to both see their work, see their discussion, see their mentor hour, their talk, and also you'll get to see interviews with me, because I'm going to have the opportunity to interview them. So I'm really excited about bringing all of this to our viewing audience. So, and what's interesting, Debbie, and then I want to just make this comment, is for me, the other beautiful thing about this is we have a problem in this country. We don't tend to value older people. And like you said, it's one of our most precious natural resources. And I know I've been talking about this for a really long time, and it's just so nice, because what this does is it really shows why we should be valuing older people. And, we can do a whole nother show regarding that. But I just wanted to say, because, this is showing the worth of older people. And what historically we're doing is we're telling people, no, you need to be younger. You need, once you get to a certain age, you're useless. And what this really shows is that's so not true. In fact, older people are the ones that can really be creative, give back. And sometimes, people make amazing discoveries when they're in their 50s, not just when they're in their 20s. So I just wanted to say congratulations to that, because this is changing the face of, I think, our culture.
We're looking at mentorship from the perspective of the mentor. We know that the mentees will get something from this, but now we're focused on the mentors. And in fact, we do know that our mentors are still doing things. None of them are just sitting around. They're inventing still. The Charlie Camarda, the astronaut who's one of our mentors, he started an education foundation where they solve epic challenges. Everyone that we have, no one said, I'm a certain age, I'm going to stop. I'm going to just sit around. That's not it at all. But one of the biggest things that people also misunderstand is that people want to give back, and particularly when they're experts, they're not looking for money at this point. They're not looking for a second job in this respect. That's why everything that they're giving back is free. Our resources are 100% free. And that's because they're at a point where they're really wanting to say, hey, did my life have meaning? I just did all this throughout my life. Is that it? Now I'm done? It's like, when you have a big party and it's the day after and you say, oh, there's that, you had a good time, but you say, oh, what else is there? There's that slight feeling of letdown. There isn't any with this. This is, you continue on. And so we really do see that this is incredible value that's not just for our mentors, but it continues the value for the next generation, because that wheel of knowledge. So if someone leaves a job and they go somewhere else, you can then start over and have to redo stuff and hope you get it right. Or you can have somebody that's saying, hey, I already know I did this. Now build on and go farther.
Yes.
And our mentors do work even together, and they've been able to solve some really cool problems together.
Right, and I know, Debbie, you recently were able to get a couple of your mentors during this pandemic that made a huge difference. Do you want to just take a moment to talk about that initiative and collaboration?
Those aren't all our mentors. What we had was our COO, an amazing, super accomplished, brilliant woman, Jen Snow. She was involved in a project where individuals from around the world put together, within just a matter of weeks, respirators, personal respirators, to be used for individuals to help in this pandemic and future instances, that could be used and in a way that was open source, so that everyone could have access to it globally. And these people all came from around the world. They're not all our mentors, but one of our mentors, and who's on our board, Jen, came together with these individuals to work to make this happen in a very short amount of time and in a way that changed the world.
That is wonderful.
We know we can work together with people around the world and make positive change happen in a couple of weeks. That's what we learned.
That's amazing. And I'm going to shift gears a little bit, because I know, because I did my research for this interview, and I happen to know that you had, when you were younger, I think about 5 years old, is when you had a very, very special mentor. And your mentor was your grandfather. And, there are a lot of kids that are watching. And, some of the things that I read about your grandfather and your experience with him, I would love for you to talk a little bit about that, because what I found, and I think that, everybody watching this will also find it very both interesting, and it'll resonate with them, because you went through all different types of feelings and experiences as a 5 and a 7 and a 12-year-old, because this man was your biggest mentor. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about that experience, and how, when you look back on it today, how it really influenced this project.
you know, I don't think that people realize how big an influence grandparents are in their lives. And I don't know that I knew of that. My grandfather was my very first real mentor. And he used to take me out every weekend when I was a kid, starting at age 5. And he'd ride around in this gigantic Cadillac. And it often had the top down. So it was a really huge Cadillac. And we'd ride around, and he would tell me, he would act as though he knew everyone that we were passing by on the street. And he'd tell me a little story about them. He'd be like, oh, yeah, that guy Joe over there, he's walking like that so fast and looking like he's upset because his wife got so mad at him because he came home and he was, you know, he was late or whatever. He always had these stories. And at first I thought, wow, he knows everybody. He's such a popular guy. But he said to me, I'm telling you this because you need to know that you don't just pass people by on the street. Everyone has a story. That there's something inside of everyone that you don't know about when you see them. That when...
Right, which is so wonderful, because I actually just got the chills hearing that, because that's why I love doing interviews, to tell people stories. So it so resonates with me. Please continue. Yeah.
And I didn't know that at the time. And the other thing about my grandfather, he would do this, but I used to get embarrassed going around with him because he was the president of the NAACP in Des Moines, Iowa, which is where I lived. And I didn't understand or know what racism was or any of that. I just didn't, you know, I didn't know what it was, but I knew that everyone treated us badly when we went places. So we'd go to sit down at a diner, and they'd give, it wasn't a diner actually, it was, the name of the place was Sambo's. Like how ridiculous. So we'd go to sit at this pancake place called Sambo's, and they'd say, we're not serving you. And it was... Yeah,
just to clarify, Debbie, your grandfather's white, you're white, and the place is white. I just want to clarify that.
It was a place that was, yes. So they were... it was people did not like that he was advocating for equal rights for Black people, that he was integrating. I learned that I didn't know what the word integrating meant, because he was integrating neighborhoods and churches and doing these sorts of things. And I didn't know what that word meant. I just knew that when we went out, that people would treat us badly. So we'd sit down, and like the lady that would come to the counter would say, I'm only going to give you, she would pour a half a glass of orange juice, and he'd say, oh, you know, I'd like a full glass. And she'd say, no, you don't get it. We're not going to give you a full glass. Go get it elsewhere. Go to another place. So, and I would get embarrassed by that. And I thought, well, just don't do whatever you're doing that's causing, you know, me to go out with you, and like people are mean to us. And then he continued to take me out, and I got to continue to see that, and see that in fact, there was something important to what he was doing, and that these weren't going to be our friends anyway. These weren't people that I was going to ever value their opinion of. So it was an interesting journey, and it was one that made me think, okay, you have to stand up for what you believe in, even if it's painful, and you can't please everybody. So stick with your guns and go with what you know is right, and just keep moving. And I think that was something that was powerful for me.
Yeah, what a beautiful thing. And I'm just curious, listening to the story, who do you think his mentor or mentors were?
You know, I don't know. I really don't know. I know that the reason that he decided to, he was always somebody who was sort of headstrong and followed what he wanted to do. And he was a very large man with a big booming voice. But I know that he started with this when he said, hey, he was Catholic. I don't like that they're giving President Kennedy, he wasn't elected president then, but that they were giving a hard time to Kennedy being elected, and he was Catholic. And so he wanted to make change. And that's when he became very politically motivated. But I think he was probably always like that. And I don't know who his mentor was, and I wish I did.
Yeah, interesting. Maybe it'll come out one day. You never know. Sometimes people uncover things, in history. So I know that, your grandpa was, as you talked about him, he was one of your biggest mentors. And have you had other ones along the way?
Oh, I've had so many mentors, and I'm so thankful to all of them, because my life has taken it's never been a straight and narrow path, and that's a good thing, I think. I've been able to see a door open and go through it, and then say, yeah, this is for me, and then say, now I'm going to go this way. And so I remember being in college, and my first, and I had she was my mentor. I don't know what I would call her. She was one of my professors, but I would go to talk to her. And I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to do anything. I was like, I just didn't know anything that you should know about being in college. And she sat me down, and she would always talk to me, but she finally said, if you're going to do it, do it. If not, just get out, go. And that was a wake-up call for me. And I said, oh, I guess you can't just sit around and have your cake and eat it too. You have to put some work in. And that changed me. Yeah. And I worked hard. I had mentors in graduate school. I've had mentors in my personal life, people who I think are just really people with high values that I admire and want to be more like.
Yeah, I think that's such an important message for people, young people, even older people to get, because when I think back, I didn't know that one could have mentors. I didn't really have a lot of people that I considered mentors until now almost. I think I'm first embracing this whole, really looking, because I think, it's interesting because we live in a society that up until this point, it was very individualistic. And the values of doing everything on your own and being independent, it's really a misconception, because no one could do anything by themselves. And so one of the messages that, that I love that you're talking about, and I want to just make it really clear to kids and even to adults, is that you can ask questions. Don't be afraid. You might be sitting there going, I don't know how to do this. Well, nobody knows how to do it until they do it. Even all the mentors that you see, or every woman that we're talking about, there was a time before they did it that they didn't know what they were doing. And I find that and it took me a really long time to realize this, that the most successful people are people who utilize their mentors. And that's what's so important. Connections, make relationships with people. And the Mentor Project is a way for people to do that. And, I just really wanted to underscore that. And if you want to speak to that.
You're so right. And I will tell you that it goes in multiple directions. One of my newest, most recent mentors who I value is Adam Gray, and he is mentoring me in social media and PR. He's probably 20, 21, and I'm in my 50s, and I realized I need help in this area. I am stumbling and fumbling in an area that I've never been comfortable in, with social media and with PR. And so I reached out and I said, will you be my mentor? And he thought, that's really, he said, what? I'll help you out. And I said, no, I need a mentor. I need you to guide me. Can you help me out? And he was sort of taken aback, because he said, well, it's weird. It's the opposite direction. And I said, no, it's not. You're the expert. I'm not. And so he mentors me. I send him questions and I say, can you help me? And I'm growing every day because of that. And yes, you have to seek it out. You can't just wait.
And that's such a beautiful thing. And I think it's such a great example, because, it took me a long time to say, I want a mentor. Can you help me? Because again, and a lot of the people I think that need it the most are kids and young adults who come from families or from social circles where they're not having those role models, they don't have those connections, and they feel like they have to do it all themselves when you never do it. And one of the things, I teach at a college, and I have the students meet each other, and I always tell them, get to know each other, because you're each other's future. You're going to need to call on each other. And that's really, what it's all about, making those connections, because it's so very important. So I want to shift again to I know that you have 2 kids, 2 boys that are adolescents, or close to adolescence. Who are their mentors?
I don't feel necessarily fully comfortable answering that, but I do know that they have one living with them, and that is my mother-in-law. She's 93, soon to be 94. And she really does guide them in all sorts of things. It's very, when you are living with someone who's a mentor, like I had with my grandfather, who I met with every week, you don't put a label of mentor on that. But I see how they're growing and developing. My mother-in-law is a Holocaust survivor, and they're learning all about injustice in the world and how you handle it and what you do and how you can advocate for yourself. All these things that they're learning from her that are sort of fluid in everyday life, but she's mentoring them for sure.
That's beautiful. Just like you didn't know at the time, and you didn't have that word, when your biggest mentor was your grandfather, looking back on it. And so and she is a very most precious, in terms of being a value. That's wonderful. And they're very lucky. And, they may not see it as much now, but they will in the future. And I know that you and your husband get to see how precious that is for them to be able to have that experience.
Oh, absolutely. Even she teaches them, they play board games with her every night for about an hour or 2. So she's really, we get to see them learning from her, whether it's a routine or just the relaxation with family, making sure that that family is important. That's a big, big role to play. So yes, I do get to see that, and it's beautiful.
That's great. So if you were going to have, if you wanted the viewing audience to have a takeaway message that's really simple, maybe 1 to 3 things, both kids and adults, what would it be regarding the Mentor Project and what you hope they may get out of it? Both, maybe, 3 points.
Sure.
Yeah.
First, anyone can be a mentor. Anyone. You don't have to be an astronaut to be a mentor. Anyone can be a mentor. Everyone's an expert in something. And that mentors are all around us. And we need to be able to acknowledge that we're getting something from someone. And that acknowledgement helps us to see the gains that we get. And it helps to propel us further. And finally, I think that we need to see life as not just a series of boxes that we check, that we're not just checking off, yes, I did this, I took this test, I took this class, I graduated here, I did this, but that life is a series of meaningful connections that we make, and that the boxes that we checked are the parts that come after that it's the meaningful connections that are actually the most important, and that's really what makes our world work.
And that's beautiful, because, it's so consistent with some of the things that I was trying to do with my shows in terms of really changing the values in our society, because for a long time, and it still exists, we need to think about, what are we really valuing, right? And what is the value? And really, as you so beautifully put it, in terms of what our most precious value are humans, and the experience, as well as the connections. So in addition to seeing, as I talked about before, seeing seniors and seeing older people as being more valuable, not less valuable, it's also in terms of, giving back and providing those experiences. So I just want to say I'm very happy to be a part of the Mentor Project. And this has just been wonderful. And I look forward to presenting both interviews with the mentors and actually the talks from the mentor. Now, if people are interested in going on to the site right now, Debbie, where can they go right now if they can't wait to see a show, next week or tomorrow? Where can they go right now to see the Mentor Project?
They can go to www.mentorproject.org. We're also on Facebook, so if you type in The Mentor Project on Facebook, you'll find us. And we have some of our presentations live streamed there, so you can see them there.
That's great. And thank you so much again. And I look forward to bringing you, Dr. Susan brings you the Mentor Project. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can also get in touch with me through the Mentor Project. Dr. Susan, thank you. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to have this conversation with you, Debbie.
The pleasure was all mine, Susan. Thank you so much. And thank you for all you do. We're so thrilled to have you as one of our mentors.
Thank you. Thanks again.
I dread cocktail parties. When I'm faced with introducing myself to someone, I cringe. Because as soon as I tell them I'm an aging specialist, or worse yet, an aging researcher, their eyes dart around the room, looking for anyone who can help them make the great escape from the most boring person in the world. I felt this same exact way before I entered the field, but I didn't need to. Let me poll you guys. I'd like you to raise your hands. These are 2 stock portfolio options. If you'd like to choose the one on the left, raise your hand. If you'd like the one on the right, raise your hand. Yeah, me too. What I just showed you weren't stock portfolio options, they're our lifespan. The one on the left shows our physical lifespan, a sharp increase and a steady decline. This is scary. This is why people run away from aging specialists. The one on our right is our emotional lifespan. This has a steady increase, but no decline. This is what gets me excited to be an aging specialist. And this is what we have to look forward to. Did you know that we can expect to be happier as we get older? Or that the phrase, "'tis better to give than to receive," is actually true? Or that meaningful connections lead to better physical and emotional well-being? Research shows these to be true. We are wasting our most precious natural resource. It isn't oil, coal, or gas. It's people. People who've honed their skills, talents, and knowledge over a lifetime. It's us. Mentoring wasn't even on my radar a few years ago. It wasn't until I put together mentorship with a life stage that we hit in midlife called generativity. Generativity was coined by Erik Erikson, the developmental psychologist, and it means that we care for others without expecting anything in return. We're leaving a legacy. It's mentoring. I've also spoken with many, many people. I've spoken with lawyers, 4-star generals, filmmakers, and grandmas, and they all mentor. Some do it sooner and some do it later. And we all know those who haven't reached this stage. They're bitter and their lives don't have any meaning. Think of Ebenezer Scrooge from Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. He was a self-made guy who seemingly had everything. He was rich, he lived in a mansion, he had servants taking care of his every need, but he was miserly with his possessions and his emotions. It wasn't until he made meaningful connections and became generative that he experienced joy. I call this the Ebenezer effect, and this is how it works in real life too. I really learned about mentorship in the most unusual place, at a hackers convention. Picture a remote wooded resort in Silicon Valley with tricked out Teslas in the parking lot and techies riding hoverboards to the buffet line. I even hopped on a hoverboard. It was a wonderland where top innovators came together to share ideas. This was the last place I thought I'd crack the code on mentorship. But here's what I learned. To create and innovate requires more than one person in a garage with an idea. Even Steve Jobs had mentors. I also learned that we need meaningful connections. I met Becky Bass, a former NSA director, and she had a slow Southern drawl that wrapped around you like a hug. And her mentees adored her. They called her Mama Bear. Well, this Mama Bear took down notorious bad guys for a living with the help of her mentees. And when she retired, she made mentorship a huge part of her life because she craved the connections that she had with her mentees. The inventor of the firewall, Bill Cheswick, said to me, "We need to get old farts like myself into the classroom to teach fourth graders quantum mechanics." He desperately wanted to mentor, but he just didn't know how to connect with mentees. This was an epiphany for me. I realized we needed to bring together mentors with mentees, STEM mentors who could build upon our science and tech boom. So in 2017, I founded the Mentor Project, and we bring mentors like Bill into the classrooms to teach kids for free. The thrill for the mentors is that they get to see the excitement on the kids' faces when they're showing them what their expertise is. They're leaving a legacy. The thrill for the kids is that they're being exposed to things they've never even thought about. Mentors come into the classrooms in person or via video chat. This way, whether they're on the East Coast, West Coast, North, South, urban or rural, everyone has access to a mentor. We all know the benefits of having a mentor, but now we know the benefits of being a mentor. Bill has been in the classroom and has presented to more than 100 kids in just a couple months. Imagine the millions of kids who can have access to STEM. Imagine if we saw older adults not as a burden with nothing to offer, but instead as someone who can teach quantum mechanics to a fourth grader, aerospace to a sixth grader, and engineering to a high schooler. Imagine if we took advantage of our most precious natural resource, us, and all of our varied skills. So the next time you meet an aging specialist, rather than run away, lean in. Thank you.
11, 10, 9, ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Okay, we got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll.
I'm going to show you a lot of stuff that if you try to answer the questions to, get into math. And as you get older, you can say, oh, this is a cool part of rockets. Now I know how they do this. And we'll talk a little about that.
Can I pull out a notebook so I can write them?
Oh, absolutely. You want to note and stuff? By the way, I will put these slides up on the net someplace so you can download them and you watch them at home on your computers if you want. It's mostly just rocket launches. I went through YouTube and got some various interesting things going on. And so I could show you and explain to you what's going on with a rocket launch, because it isn't just a big fire and a thing going in the sky. There's a lot going on, and you guys are old enough to understand what that stuff is, at least a lot of it. Okay? Any other comments? No? Okay. So people call me Ches. I've been a science guy since I was about your age. That was back in the 1950s. Hello. Okay. So what I want to do today is show you a little bit about stuff I have been inventing. Okay, so when you see my arm moving, it's moving, right? When you see the movie of an arm moving, what's moving? No. No, nothing. On the movie, what are you seeing? You're seeing light on the screen.
So 4, 8, 9, so it's almost 1.5. So this battery is like brand new, so I'm definitely going to steal this one, right? Because this is a good one. But you'll notice that, there's basically one value on that screen. So we can actually do this very same thing with the oscilloscope. So you can measure voltage with an oscilloscope. So they have a fancier looking probe, as we call it, but they pretty much work the same way. I might need your help here.
Would it just be like straight because it's DC?
Yeah, man, that's exactly right. So it's gonna be, you're gonna see a straight line, exactly, because it's DC. In fact, let me take this guy off. Let's do this. So actually, do me a favor, take that little pointy thing and just make sure it keeps touching the metal. So we're on, our probe is on channel 1. So I'm just gonna turn off some other stuff just to make it clear.
On the screen? You can see better from here, Debbie.
So channel 2, actually, you know what, we'll just work with, yeah, okay, so channel 1's the yellow line, and we're gonna slow the time down, and I'll explain to you in a second what it's doing. All right, so take the probe off for a second. See how the line changes? Actually, I'll just speed up a little bit, do it again. Touch it, and let go. Touch it, and let go. So what's happening is the oscilloscope is measuring the voltage.
Yeah.
So when you're not touching it, the oscilloscope is actually measuring 0. But the key thing that the oscilloscope does is that it gives you a measurement of time, right? So the length of time that you held it on there is and then when you took it off, it's now represented on the screen. So they measure waveforms, what we call a waveform. So something that actually changes with time. And that's really, really useful when you're looking at signals that aren't DC. So this is kind of boring, right? If you just held that on there, it just goes up to 5 volts and boring. But if it was an AC waveform, or if it was a sinusoidal waveform, or if it was a digital waveform, it would actually be changing. But you can't really measure that with a multimeter because it doesn't give you any perspective of time on the screen. So that's one of the main things that a scope, as we like to call it, can do for you. This scope can measure 4 things at the same time. So if you had 4 different signals that you were trying to compare in time, you could see them on the screen. And all these knobs they look really like complicated and fancy, but basically all the knobs do is change the scale. So this time scale. So are we looking at a 10-second window, a microsecond window, a millisecond window, and then the vertical scale is the volts. So are we measuring a battery that's 2 volts, or are we measuring a power supply that's 300 volts? So you can kind of just change the scales, the vertical, and then the horizontal scale, the time scale, to make the signal of interest fit on the wave on the screen. So.
JJ, I just want to clarify something, because you mentioned hackers, and sometimes hackers have like this association to really not doing good, that they're hacking in a kind of a bad way. Could you just explain that a little bit?
Definitely, and that's a really important distinction. So the hackers that we work with in the government are called ethical hackers. And these ladies and gentlemen that are teaming with us are the best and brightest in their field. And they specifically focus on finding critical vulnerabilities and calling them out and helping to fix them across government, interagency partners, universities, medical teams. In fact, there's a great team out there right now called the Cyber Threat Intelligence League. It's 1,400 hackers, all volunteers, that are working across 70 countries, 22 time zones, and they are collaborating with the government to identify key vulnerabilities in those spaces, and to include Wi-Fi enabled medical devices to protect the health and safety and the well-being of these different countries. And it's really exciting to see, because 100% volunteer effort, and we've cut through all the red tape, and they're accomplishing incredible things. In fact, in a lot of cases, they're actually identifying vulnerabilities that haven't been seen or haven't been identified before, and helping to fix those, which means we're going to have more secure nations as a whole going forward.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because I know that sometimes they're stereotyped as hackers are those people that are in their homes and in the basements and in garages, and they're trying to get into people's bank accounts and into large corporations to mess everything up and steal identities. So that's not hackers. Some of them, but that's not the majority that you're talking about.
Those are the malicious hackers. Those are the nefarious hackers. Those are the bad hackers that we don't like. These are the good hackers. These are the ethical hackers that are actually out there trying to counter those bad behaviors and helping to make sure that bad people aren't able to do bad things.
Well, thank you for that clarification.
Inventions are built upon tying 2 previous ideas together. And ideas, like fashions, tend to go in circles. If you know the history of a particular technology, you will find that probably tomorrow's technologies have a lot to do with the technologies that have been obsolete for a little while. And that you will tie technologies together from one area to another, cross-connecting things. So your best solutions are when you begin to think of things in the big picture and begin to connect them together. One of our problems in our society is that some people are born with strategic thinking and some people are born with tactical thinking. But our schools are designed for tactical thinking only. You have the time to the end of the class, or the homework that's due this day or tomorrow or this week, or maybe the end of the semester. But you don't think long term, you don't think big picture, you don't think, what am I trying to accomplish here? The kids are floating along in the school stream. I was born or cursed with strategic thinking, and as a result, I tend to look at the big picture, and then I find holes in the fabric and figure out, oh, well, that needs to be filled. That helps me, but that's not the way all too quickly, at which point in time, by the time November came around, I really understood the material from early October. And that was really not useful when the midterm came around or the final exam came around. But if I took the class a second time, well, I get an A in it because I'd had a long enough period of time for the information to sink into my brain. I also realized early on that there's a difference between getting a passing grade and mastery. And this is one of the most important things that I was very fortunate to have beaten into my head. If a first grader is learning the alphabet, and if 70% is a passing grade, then why do they need to learn letters past Q? That's 70% of the alphabet. Why do you need to know verbs? You know nouns and adjectives. You don't need to know these other things, right? Well, wrong. You have to know 100% of it. There's a lot of things that you have to know 100% of. And you have to master it. And you have to master it completely forward and backwards. And you have to get it down right. There's lots of things in this world you can know 70% of it. It's probably not important to someone whether they get the date of the Battle of Hastings exactly right. But you have to understand where the Battle of Hastings sits in the world. And so one of the problems that I bumped into is a lot of people have gaps in their knowledge because they have 70% knowledge on things that are foundational. And then when they get farther in life,
you know, I was reading science and had chemistry sets and microscopes and a telescope.
Was your family into science? Was that anything in there?
No. My parents said, "Where did this come from?" I mean, if you want to look at it, my grandfather was an industrial engineer. If you think there was some sort of genetic connection, but no, I was just fascinated. I want to know about all of this. It also came from science fiction. And remember, this is the 60s. We had nuclear power, atom bombs. Space, people were going into space. Oh my God. We had lasers and new drugs and DNA had just been discovered. And my God, the future was going to be terrific. And in fact, this is something I say these days. I love living in the future. This is what we were looking forward to. And really, it's extremely cool. There is so much great stuff. You know, this is, first of all, none of those science fiction authors, and I read them all, thought of anything like the internet. Really, the first one I saw was in the mid-70s. This computer right here, this iPhone, has more power than the Cray we had at Bell Labs in 1990. And it costs well under $1,000. Nobody guessed this would happen. It's just amazing to have this sort of stuff around here. So I wanted to know how things worked. I played with electronics. I wasn't always the best student. But I remember in 6th grade, my report card said, Bill probably knows more science than his science teacher. And I felt I was chuffed. That was just great. Now I look back at it and say, that was awful. What kind of school system would let someone interested in science not have what you could? Now, in 7th grade, I did have good science teachers, and I had lousy science grades. I was busy with my own stuff. I didn't get along with that particular teacher very well. So this is tough.
But I think, it's good. I think it's good for like a lot of kids and parents to know that kids don't always have to be perfect students, and they can grow up and accomplish unbelievable things, because it's really about, we put pressure on kids to succeed and excel in ways that really, might not determine their future at all. So continue, please.
It's true. But, so I am somewhat of an autodidact. I don't want to, but if I did, I could do that. But instead, I'm writing computer programs. I must really like writing computer programs. Writing a computer program is an act of science and math, but there's also artistry, and you have to know algorithms and all that sort of stuff. But there's also, it's a creation. You're making a machine, really, when you write a program. It's not sitting there with gears, but it's something in a computer that does stuff. It can be hugely complicated. And here we go. Hugely complicated. And in fact, one of the biggest problems with programs is controlling the complication. because it's easy to keep adding, festooning it with so much stuff that it goes. I still love doing that. The internet security was time and place. You know, I was at Bell Labs, I was running a firewall, I was changing it and adding it, I was learning all this stuff. The internet had a few thousand computers on it. It's a big experiment. Thank you all for playing. You know, now there's, what, 4 billion addresses in use. Oh my God. That's also another thing to look for is an industry or area that's growing. Mm-hmm. It's better to be in a growing business than in the buggy whip business because it's not growing. So find companies and industries or things that are growing.
Now
go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Nope, go ahead.
All right. So I've also picked up a variety of patents over the years. And my nephew said, Uncle Bill, how do you get to be an inventor? I said, that's a darn good question, because I would never have told anyone in my first 25 years that I was going to be an inventor. And I had to think about it. And I always like to know how things work. My dad showed me how a toilet worked, and I'd fix toilets, and I'd fix electrical stuff around the house and learn all that sort of thing. But it turns out the more you learn about how things work, the more you might be able to come up with